Well, a very good evening and thank you for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Ashmit Kumar and here are the top stories that we're tracking at this hour. Wall Street wobbles after ratings agency Fitch downgrades the US government credit rating. Fitch flags growing debt burden and cites erosion of governance. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen criticizes the move, calling it arbitrary. Stock markets decline across the world after the Fitch downgrade. Sensex drops below 66,000. Nifty loses over 200 points even after pairing some losses in late trade. Rupee weakens to a 3-month low. Tensions run high in Haryana after communal clashes in New district on Monday. At least 6 persons have been killed in this flare-up. It reached Gurugram. Prohibitory orders have been imposed in some districts. Finance Minister says she hopes to implement the 28% GST on full face value for online real money gaming, casinos and horse racing from the 1st of October. Says the tax may be reviewed 6 months after implementation. Also clarifies that the tax will be on the initial payment by a player or his agent and not on winnings used for subsequent bets. Revenue Secretary says bets placed using virtual digital assets will also fall under the GST ambit. The government is likely to introduce the data protection bill tomorrow. CNBC-TV18 has exclusive access to the final version of the bill, which shows significant changes from the previous version. Data collecting entities do not need consent to transfer personal data. Union government gets immunity from legal action. Penalty slashed by half to 250 crore rupees. Twitter's parent company moves Karnataka High Court, files an appeal against a single bench order dismissing its plea challenging the content blocking orders issued by the government. Indigo reports record revenue, profit and margins in the first quarter thanks to strong growth and lower fuel costs. Passenger growth is over 30% and capacity has increased by 19%. Vedanta's promoters set to sell over 4% stake through a block deal tomorrow. Plan to raise more than 4,100 crore rupees. The floor price is fixed at 5% discount. That's a CNBC Awaaz exclusive. Foxconn inks another deal with Karnataka government. Will be investing 5,000 crore rupees in 2 projects. One of the projects will be in partnership with US-based Applied Materials. This investment is in addition to the 14,000 crore rupee iPhone manufacturing project in the state announced earlier. A delegation of 31 MPs from opposition parties meet President Draupadi Murmu, seeking her intervention over the ethnic clashes in Manipur. Asked the president to urge the Prime Minister to speak inside the parliament on the crisis. Former United States President Donald Trump indicted for attempts to overturn results of the 2020 presidential elections. Federal authorities accused Trump of 4 charges. This is the 3rd time in 4 months that the former US president has been criminally charged. Well, here's the top story this evening. Ratings agency Fitch has downgraded the US government's long-term credit rating from a AAA to a AA+ rating. Now, this is the first time in more than a decade that a major firm has downgraded the US government. The last time the US government was downgraded by a ratings agency was way back in 2011. CNBC's Arabil Gumbeed joins us now with more.
Fitch stripping the United States of its AAA credit rating, downgrading America to AA+. Now, the agency cited what was a steady deterioration in standards of governance over the last 20 years, following the highly fraught bipartisan talks in the month of May, which eventually saw the debt ceiling raised until January 2025. Now, the agency had placed the U.S. on negative watch following the 11th hour deal. Fitch then also flagged a high debt burden, along with an expected mild recession that's set to happen in the 4th quarter. Now, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen hit out at the decision, describing it then as, quote, arbitrary and based on outdated data. Reaction to this move then was muted, though, from analysts in particular, with demand for treasuries actually expected to remain strong as a safe haven asset despite this downgrade. A note from Goldman Sachs even noted that the move from Fitch did not reflect any new information and should not have any major impact on markets.
I think from a longer-term perspective, people are going to begin to thinking that they've got to diversify their holdings first away from the U.S. and also into equities, because that's a way to protect them from any deterioration of the currency, the U.S. dollar, or for that matter, any other currency. So I would say this downgrade is going to have a lot of people thinking about diversification, not only away from the U.S. market, but generally speaking, away from their home markets.
What we can clearly see as we come in today in Asia is that the dollar is very stable. We've got a slight backup in the 10-year yield, but there's nothing of great significance there.
Well, the stock markets decline across the world after Fitch downgrade. The Wall Street was no exception. It followed suit despite bearing some losses in late trade. Nifty and Sensex ended over 1% in the red. 43 of 50 Nifty stocks ended lower, with most stocks down 3%. Banks underperformed the blue chips. That index saw cuts of 1.5%. BSE companies, meanwhile, raised a market cap of over 3 lakh crore rupees. Well, Interglobe Aviation has reported strong numbers in the first quarter, beating the street's expectations across all parameters. The company's revenue rose nearly by 30% on a year-on-year basis. Sonia Shenoy is joining us now with more details. Sonia, take us through these numbers.
It was indeed a very strong set of numbers that Indigo reported in this quarter. It was record high revenues and profitability from the company. In fact, fuel costs also fell substantially, aiding the margins this time, which came in at a record high of 31.2%. Let's go through the numbers. A revenue growth of almost 30% is what the company reported. This is on account of a passenger growth of 30% year on year. The capacity for Indigo has also increased about 18%, 18.8% to be precise. And on the EBITDA front as well, it's come in at 31.2% EBITDA margins compared to less than 6% last year. On the profitability as well, the company has reported a huge net profit of almost 3,100 crores compared to a big loss of almost 1,064 crores last time. An improvement in passenger demand, lower fuel costs is something that has aided the stock, and I expect the stock to open in the green tomorrow.
Well, staying with the earnings, Titan reported a mixed bag this quarter. The company's net profit and margins missed the street's expectations, while revenue beat expectations. On a year-on-year basis, the company's net profit slumped by 2%, while revenue rose 24%. Moving on, cement manufacturer Ambuja has posted a strong set of first quarter numbers, with its revenue beating the estimates. The company's margins were also in line with expectations. However, profits missed the mark slightly, declining 38% compared to last year. The promoters of Vedanta are planning to sell more than 4% stake in the company through a block deal tomorrow. CNBC Awaz is reporting, citing sources that promoter entity Twin Star will be paring stake at a floor price of just over 258 rupees per share. This is a 5% discount to the current market price. The promoters are hoping to raise $500 million through the stake sale, which will amount to a little over 4,100 crore rupees. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said that she hopes to implement the 28% GST on full face value for the online real money gaming, casinos and horse racing from the 1st of October. Speaking to the press after the council's meet earlier today, Sitharaman said that the tax may be reviewed 6 months after implementation. She also clarified that the tax will be on the initial payment by a player or their agent and not on the winnings used for subsequent bets. Furthermore, Revenue Secretary Sanjay Malhotra clarified that bets placed using virtual digital assets will also be falling under the ambit of GST.
The council agreed today to come back after 6 months to review the way in which this is getting implemented. When I say 6 months, it's not 6 consecutive months beginning from today. It begins from after when this gets implemented. We are all hopeful that it gets implemented from 1st October. If it is 1st October when it gets implemented, 6 months from then, the council can review the position.
Well, communal tensions are running high in Haryana after clashes broke out between communities in New district on Monday during a religious procession. 6 persons have lost their lives so far. The flare-up reached Gurugram as well. Select shops were vandalized and set on fire by a mob in Badshapur. The Supreme Court, meanwhile, refused to restrict VHP and Bajrang Dal protest rally scheduled in Delhi NCR in the aftermath of the new violence. The court, however, directed the administration to ensure that there is no such hate speech against a particular community or acts of violence. My colleagues Shivani Bajaj and Abhimanyu Sharma report from Badshapur and New, where communal tensions are running high.
We are standing in Gurugram's Badshapur area where violence broke out yesterday, 2 days after violence broke out in Haryana's New. And I'm standing here in front of the 2 shops that were totally set ablaze by a mob yesterday. As you can see, the entire 2 shops have been gutted and turned to ashes. Nearly 14 shops were vandalized in the main market of Badshapur yesterday. And the locals here say that a mob of more than 100 men targeted and vandalized shops in the area and set many of the shops ablaze. The mobs targeted shops mostly selling biryani and chicken is what we are getting to understand from the locals here. And in the nearby sector of Sector 57 of Gurugram, there was also an attack on a mosque recently where one person has lost his life. Late last night, there was also a fire that broke out in a cycle shop in Sector 70, but the police has not given any information about how the fire broke out, but they've just said that the fire was under control. The government has imposed 144 of CRPC to deal with the violence here, and educational institutions remained shut yesterday.
We are currently standing in New, where still there is an uneasy calm. Section 144 is in place. Not just the state police, but also central security forces have been deployed across the city and its vicinity. Internet services have been suspended, not just in New, but also in adjoining areas like Sohna. It remains to be seen how the situation is going to pan out. There is a possibility that a relaxation of a few hours from Section 144 will be given to people to come out and buy essential goods and items.
जिस दिन हमारे साथ ये हादसा हुआ था 2:30 बजे ये हादसा चालू हुआ था 6 साढ़े 6 बजे तक प्रशासन की शासन की कोई मदद नहीं मिली थी। इवन अ सिंगल पर्सन पुलिस का कोई बंदा नहीं था।
अभी तो डर से लोग बाग सो भी नहीं रहे हैं, क्योंकि पता नहीं पहाड़ों में घुसे पड़े, कबाड़ टूटे। यही स्थिति है यहाँ की। भाई डर तो डर होता है।
We're standing in the Padli Road area in New in Haryana, where violence and arson since the past few days has impacted the people who are living in the vicinity. Behind me is a temple which was pelted with stones. The marks of the pelted stones can still be seen on the gate of the temple, and the asbestos and plastic sheets at the exterior of the temple can be seen as impaled as of now. Vehicles were also torched. This shop located towards my left was gutted in the arson which was carried out a couple of days back.
प्रशासन ने जैसे अपना जैसे ये स्थिति गंभीर हुई थी तो प्रशासन को सूचना दी गई, तो प्रशासन ने जैसे भी हुआ उचित समय पे आके इस स्थिति को नियंत्रण में किया, काबू में किया.
This is the Nalladeshwar Mahadev temple located in New Mewat. This is an ancient temple where an annual Shobha Yatra is carried out during these Hindu calendar months. The Shobha Yatra is being carried out since the past couple of years according to the temple staff. This year, as the temple staff stated, when the Yatra was exiting from this temple and was passing through the new city, that is the time when the situation worsened and violence broke out, after which the Yatra and the devotees were forced to turn back into the temple and they were stuck inside the temple for a few hours. As of now, the temple administration and the security forces are trying to ensure normalcy, even as there is Section 144 imposed across the city of New and internet services continue to remain suspended.
Well, the Supreme Court will be conducting a hearing on the law and order situation in the region on Friday. That's the after tomorrow, on August 4th. With that, it's time now to slip into a very short break. But up next, the government is likely to introduce the Data Protection Bill tomorrow. CNBC-TV18 has exclusive access to the final version of the bill, which shows significant changes from the previous version. Details when we come back. It was in August of 2017 that the Supreme Court declared privacy to be a fundamental right. 6 years later, we finally have a data protection bill that gives some semblance of a regulatory framework. We managed to get an exclusive sneak peek at the final version due to be tabled in the Parliament. So, what are the changes that have been done as compared to the last draft that was made public in November of 2022? Well, to begin with, number one, this is one of the biggest changes. In the earlier version, the government was supposed to notify countries where data can be sent for processing a positive list. The government now has done a complete 180 to grant relief to the industry. It will now be notifying countries where personal data can't be sent for processing, a negative list. Number two, in reduced compliance for entities collecting data, the final version has done away with the need to seek consent for transfer of personal data to a third entity for processing. Number three, there's some relief for startups as well. The earlier draft allowed the government to exempt certain entities from complying with the bill. In the final version, the bill explicitly mentions that startups could also be exempted. Number four, the government had received considerable feedback on a clause in the earlier draft which required entities to seek consent from parents while processing personal data of children. It was called age gating then. It has now been tweaked. If the government is satisfied that personal data of children is being handled securely, it may prescribe an age beyond which the entity collecting data no longer needs parental consent. Number five, there have also been a couple of additions. The government has given itself the power to block certain entities. The government has also given itself the power to seek any data from entities for purposes of this act. Number six, in another tweak to the earlier draft, the final version of the bill gives the central government immunity from lawsuits. This is in addition to the immunity enjoyed by Data Protection Board, its chairperson, as well as its members. Number seven, interestingly, the maximum penalty, which was earlier pegged at 500 crore rupees, has now been trimmed by half to 250 crores. And finally, number eight, decisions of the Data Protection Board can be challenged before the TDSAT. As per the earlier draft, it could be appealed only before high courts. For a more detailed and comprehensive look at the final version of the bill, do check out our website, CNBC-TV18.com. Also, don't forget to mark your calendars. The government is likely to table the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill in Parliament shortly.
The bill will be released when it is introduced in Parliament. That is the way it has happened for the last 75 years. That is the way it will happen on the 75th year as well. When the bill is introduced into Parliament by the Ministry and the Minister, the bill is then available to the MPs for them to study, to have their views. The fact that data protection is an important aspect of protecting citizens' rights to privacy and data protection, and that we have to put a stop to the exploitation and the misuse of personal data that some platforms do, that I hope it is done sooner rather than later.
Well, speaking of parliamentary action, the Jan Vishwas bill has been passed by the Rajya Sabha after it received the Lok Sabha's nod last week. The bill will decriminalize nearly 200 provisions in 42 central acts and remove imprisonment for several offences. Experts in the pharmaceutical industry have raised, meanwhile, concerns over the changes to the punishment for substandard drugs. Ekta Batra is joining us now with more details. Ekta, can you tell us more about what the concerns raised by the pharma industry are so far?
Well, one of the primary concerns around the Jan Vishwas bill, which was recently passed by the Lok Sabha, is that the bill aims to decriminalize only minor offences. According to industry watchers such as Dinesh Thakur and Prashant Reddy, this is not true. According to the two, the bill has converted all offences punishable under Section 27D, a provision which is most frequently invoked by drug inspectors in the country, into compoundable offences, which means an accused can escape jail by paying a fine of just 5 lakh rupees. The fear now is that manufacturing NSQ, or not of standard quality drugs, will now not be considered a serious offence. A few examples of cases of NSQ under Section 27D include injections failing the test of sterility, to tablets failing quality testing, to a lack of an active ingredient in a drug. Cases involving NSQ drugs then can have serious implications for patients, from inadequate treatment to infections to even death. The fear is that these serious cases could then be punishable only with a fine. This, according to experts, comes at a time when India has been in the dock for cases of poor quality drugs exported in the past 1 year from substandard cough syrups linked to Indian companies Marin Biotech, Made in Pharma and QP Pharma Chem to eye drops linked to vision damage in patients in Sri Lanka and the US.
Right, Ekta, thanks a lot for that. Now, senior opposition leaders met the President, Draupadi Murmu, and sought her intervention to restore peace and harmony in Manipur. According to a memorandum, the opposition alliance India urged her to press upon the Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address the Parliament on the Manipur issue. They added that their demands for a discussion on Manipur have been rejected in both houses of the Parliament. And social media giant Govt, formerly known as Twitter, has filed an appeal to quash the Karnataka High Court ruling that it was not compliant with government orders to remove content. The company has argued that the order could embolden New Delhi to block more content and broaden the scope for censorship. Remember, the State High Court had dismissed Twitter's plea challenging the series of blocking orders issued between February of 2021 to February of 2022. It also imposed a fine of 50 lakh rupees on the social media platform. Foxconn has signed a letter of intent with the Karnataka government to invest 5,000 crore rupees in 2 manufacturing projects. Karnataka Industries Department said that Foxconn plans to set up a phone enclosure and semiconductor equipment manufacturing unit. The projects could potentially create 13,000 jobs. SpiceJet has sought shareholders' approval for fund infusion and issuing equity to lessor Carlyle Aviation in conversion of dues. The budget carrier stock soared in trade today on the news. The airline also said that it has sought shareholder approval for reappointment of Ajay Singh as managing director for a 3-year term effective from May 21st, 2023. Chinese automaker BYD has come under the scanner. The Directorate of Revenue Intelligence has alleged that the company paid less taxes on imported parts for cars it assembles and sells. A Reuters report suggests that the company has underpaid tax to the tune of 73 crore rupees. The report has suggested that BYD has deposited that sum of money after the DRI's findings, and the investigation is currently underway. And speaking of tax raids, home appliance maker Whirlpool disclosed that Directorate of Revenue Intelligence carried out searches at its Gurugram and Puducherry units. The searches are in connection with alleged misclassification of one of its washing machine components. Well, India has surpassed France to become the top Scotch whisky market for Chivas Brothers by volume. Now, the UK-based Scotch whisky maker is now looking at bringing and creating new brands for India. Shilpa Rani Petta travelled to Scotland at the company's invitation to find out more. Take a look.
Scotland may be the heart and home of Scotch whisky, but the highest volumes of this spirit come from India. Driven by premiumization, growing penetration and widening of the consumer's repertoire, alcohol beverage players across the world like Chivas Brothers, maker of brands like Glenlivet, Chivas Regal and Ballantine's, are betting big on the Indian market.
97% is IMFL and Scotch is only 3%. So I think the potential is huge to keep on growing as well on the Indian market. We'll bring new brands to the Indian market, and we're particularly looking at new single malt brand. And the second thing that we are doing as well is to bring brand extension to the Indian market, either existing in the world or done for India and made for India and doing for India and for the world.
India is a key market not just for Chivas, but its parent company Pernod Ricard as well, as the third largest market in terms of top line. The company is now looking at expanding its portfolio in the Indian market, not just for whiskey, but for white spirits as well.
We've seen a growth trajectory coming in, a double-digit growth over the past few years. We have already crossed the levels that we were at pre-COVID. And so for us, it's extremely important that we are investing into India as a market, not just in terms of the product portfolio that we are bringing in, but also capital expenditure that we are doing in India. Whiskies will continue to be a core part of our portfolio. That's the way the industry is also cut up in India. The last year has been a solid growth on our gin portfolio. We are seeing a similar trend on tequila that we saw on gin a couple of years back. And so we are very bullish about this category too.
But India operations haven't been without challenges for Pernod Ricard, from coming under ED lens to Delhi rejecting its application to renew sale license. India's 150% tariff on imported whisky has been a key sticking point for stalling the free trade agreement with UK. India is unwilling to relent to UK's demand to gradually cut the tariff as things stand.
We are very strong supporters of the free trade agreement because we think that it will be a win-win both for UK and for India in terms of business. And today, you know, there is not an equal play field between India and the UK, because when Scotch whisky is exported into India, there is a 150% tariff. But when Indian whiskies are imported to the UK, there is a 0% tariff.
Despite the regulatory challenges that the company has been facing in the country, Pernod Ricard India says that it continues to remain invested in the Indian market and is looking at not just making and innovating more in terms of the IMFL segment, but is also looking to bring more and more of its global brands to the Indian market. In Keith in Scotland, Shilpa Rani Peta.
But on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you so much for watching. News and updates continue right here on CNBC-TV18.